Mordecai transfer. Manny Navarro in theathletic.com, and I want to start with that, guys. I sent an article to both of you. It's in theathletic.com. He'll join us at 4:30. If you look at the reactions, these are players who have been at these all-star, high school players who have been at these all-star football games, these postseason games, and based on at least the responses I saw, the NIL, at least for most of them, did not seem to be among the number one or number two reasons they chose a school.
Well, and I look at it two ways. That's good in one regard in that, if you want to take the glasses half full approach to it, in that these are clearly smarter kids that know, and most of their answers were, and some of them said, yeah, I got offered by this school and didn't take it, or this, it just didn't seem right, or I liked the school better. And they answered all the questions in the right way. And that's great. If you're mature enough to know that, yeah, if you're a good enough player, NIL is going to come your way in today's day and age, and that you shouldn't make the decision solely based on that, that's great. That means you've got good people in your life, adults, parents, helping you make good decisions. You're probably a mature kid. The other part of it, though, I thought, and the glass is half empty, is that maybe not all these kids were telling the truth on that because they didn't want to sound like jerks. So they knew what people would say if they're like, oh, yeah, this was important to me. This is the most important thing. They didn't want to say that. Kind of like if somebody asks you, what are you looking for in a soulmate? And if you said, well, she's got to be really hot first, you're going to sound shallow as opposed to like, oh, I want her to have a sense of humor and be intelligent and all this other stuff. I think they didn't want to sound like that.
Yeah, it was an interesting article. I mean, I do wonder, too, how much truth-telling there was by some guys. I do think when you're dealing with teenagers, no matter how mature they might be or not, that there's, this boastfulness that you have in your youth, especially if you're a high-profile football player. I'm sure that, you want to sound like you're amongst the big wigs and that you're, a guy getting offered $1 million or whatever. I'm sure part of that's wanting to sound cool, but I don't know, like, were they all sitting in a circle being asked the questions? Because if you were just off to the side, like, there's no reason really to fib all that much unless, you're self-aware enough to know, oh, well, this is going to be on The Athletic. I better say something. So, I mean, maybe for some guys there was an element of that. But I don't know. There's a lot of different things just casually thrown around. I mean, one guy worth more than $1 million. One school mentioned 3.2 over 4 years. Nobody talked to me. One guy says 7 figures. One guy says $75,000, a car and an apartment were all offered him. One guy says numbers didn't come up, but the schools like basically introduce you to the folks who do the NIL side of things. And I think that's one of the great falsehoods that's trying to be portrayed and that everybody knows is complete BS. Kind of like we always knew it was BS that players were getting paid back in the day when it was illegal. Oh, no, it's all on the up and up. We all knew that was bupkis. But now they try to act like instead of that, since that's all now free and clear, they try to act as though the schools have nothing to do with any of this NIL and that it's just these collectives just popping up and, no ties whatsoever to the schools. And like, we know that is just complete 100% garbage. I mean, that is the biggest lie. But, there's not much that can be done about it, and it's fine, I guess, in the end, as long as the money's, getting in the players' hands. But I do wish they would try and, like, stop perpetuating that scam that somehow the schools aren't involved here. Like, I mean, that's right. That's just ridiculous.
Well, some are actually commercializing their NIL companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly. But, I mean, I guess you could take it how you want to. I definitely think there's certain guys that are getting offered 7 figures over a certain amount of years. I definitely think there's guys getting offered $75K at an apartment and a car. I definitely think there's guys who probably aren't getting offered that much. And I don't know. I suppose it just depends on who you're talking to and who the schools are that are courting him, because we're talking about hundreds. We're talking really about thousands of players. But even over those top 15 to 20 programs who probably have the money to really go all in on NIL, you're still talking about hundreds of guys. So no matter how, rich the coffers are, this is only going to be for a select few guys. I mean, TCU's probably getting a big boon in NIL right now, but that's not going to the second string guard. That's going to Quentin Johnston, or that's going to Max Duggan, or that's going to some of those guys. So I don't know. I think it just depends on where you look. And that's one of the things that's still being kind of figured out, even on the part of the money people, is probably how do we do this better in the future? How do we spread it out more evenly? Or how do we saw that with Texas Tech and with Texas, let's make the whole O-line feel like they're all the same,
Yep.
or let's make the entire team feel like they're all the same. And that's extended beyond football. So, just depends on where you look. But I don't doubt for a second that certain guys, unnamed or not, are getting offered millions for over 4 years.
I think the best way, and of course it's easy for me to say if I was Bryce Young or someone like that, I would maybe think differently. I don't know. But, for example, is that a school that has NIL, how many companies it might be, is you take everything, put it in a pot, and then split it. Now, I don't know if the Stars would want that. I don't know if that's what they would want, because Bijan, and I'll use him as a guy that seemed like he's as level-headed as anybody that's a star, and I'm not saying there aren't others. He gets a Lamborghini, right? And they're not going to give a Lamborghini to everybody, but then he shared some of what he gets with others, with his offensive line or quarterbacks. I think even Quinn Ewers did that. Among others, Caleb Williams did that. But the article was in theathletic.com if you want to look at it, and Manny Navarro will join us. So we'll pick his brain about a lot of what was said, how they asked the question. Was it off to the side? Was it one-on-one? Was it by cell phone? Was it by text? Was it, as you said, maybe in a group? How did they go about getting that information?
But going back to your part of your question about, do you think that's really like the first, second, third thing or whatever? I think that too just depends on who you really talk to. I think there are guys who maybe come from a more well-off family, so it doesn't have to be as important. And maybe they come from a well-off family, and it's still important because they want their own money. So, I mean, again, that depends on who you ask. For some guys, I do think that academics probably does trump money because what was the old Florida State, the brilliant dude, the five-star?
Myron Roll.
Yeah, Myron Roll. Like, they could be a Myron Roll type, right? Who's, like, really is just so focused on education and realizes, like, the money's going to come into play at some point or another regardless. So, again, I think that, too, is just depends on who you ask. And there is absolutely zero doubt that some guys, no matter probably what they really feel are the priorities, are being guided behind the scenes by others whose money money is important to them. And, I don't know if it would necessarily be street agent or family member or coach or, mentor or what have you. I think there's the danger of that when you have as many guys as we're talking about all across the country. I'm sure there's some elements of that where money is absolutely the driving force because of a situation or, the person, like I said, who's guiding them or just their own desires. Like, I just want to be rich. That's why I play football. I want to get money. So, again, another thing where it just depends on who you ask.
I think, and, obviously it changes throughout your life. If I was 17 years old and this was, your parents can tell you a lot of things when you're 17. If you were the most emotionally adjusted 17-year-old, you probably still see, dollar signs in your head. But as you go through life, and I would tell anybody this, when you're looking at a place to go in a career placement, and this is kind of that, if you're looking at a job, money should not be your number one thing, because if it is, you're going to leave out some opportunities that are probably better for you as a human being, but it needs to be in your top 5. I mean, it needs to be something that you care about. So when you're recruiting right now, if NIL is something that you can get, and not every recruit's going to get on NIL, or like an NIL that would make you go, wow. But if it's something you can get, it's got to be a priority. But the smart ones are not making it their top priority, because if you do, you're going to wind up in the transfer portal. You're going to wind up unhappy. You're not going to like where you are. And then it all starts again. And then because you took some of that NIL money, is the next place going to do it because can they trust you? Yeah. Even though it may not even be your fault.
Not everybody who's a millionaire or billionaire or people who make 5, 6, 800,000 a year or 150,000 a year are happy. It is important. It does, of course, make and allow you to do things that you want to do or have things that you want to have. But in the end, is it a good fit? Do you have relationships? And some of the players mentioned that. Manny will join us today at 4:30.